Creating Consultative Governance, Perspectives on Government Capacity for Consultations, is a panel discussion covering a range of experiences from various walks of governance, regulatory expertise, private sector learnings, as well as administrative and ministerial grounding. To begin this list of erudites that we have today, we have one of the sharpest legal and administrative minds, Shri P.K. Malhotra. Shri Malhotra retired as Law Secretary from the Ministry of Law and Justice, Government of India in 2016, where he worked for more than 25 years as an officer of the Indian Legal Service. He is a postgraduate holding a Master's of Arts in Political Science and has a Master's in Law. He is a gold medalist in international law from Delhi University and has more than 40 years of experience under his belt in the field of law. He has held various important positions in the Government of India, including that of Member, Law Commission of India, Presiding Officer and Member, Securities Appellate Tribunal, Chairman and Adjudicating Authority of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, and the Judicial Member of Income Tax Appellate Tribunal. He has also been bestowed with several awards from national and international bodies, including the Indian National Bar Association, as well as the Telecom Export Promotion Council of India. We would like to welcome Shri Malhotra to our panel discussion today, and we warmly request you to join us on stage. Next, we have one of the chief economists and regulatory leaders in the country, Dr. Deepak Mohanty. Dr. Deepak Mohanty assumed charge as Chairperson of the Pension Fund Regulatory and Development Authority on 20th March 2023. Dr. Mohanty is an economist with substantive policy experience. Earlier, he was the Chief Economic Advisor to the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, or FICCI. He has also served as the Executive Director of the Reserve Bank of India and has worked as a Senior Advisor at the International Monetary Fund. He has chaired several committees, along with having several publications in professional journals and edited 2 books. He has a doctorate and 2 master's degrees in economics. We would like to extend a warm welcome to Dr. Mohanty, and we welcome you to join us on the dais as well. Now, we have someone whose life has encompassed both private and public administration, Shri Adil Zainulbhai. Shri Zainulbhai is currently the Chairman of the Capacity Building Commission of India, which was set up by the Honorable Prime Minister of India in April 2021. He also serves as the Chairperson, Board of Governors at the Indian Institute of Technology, Ropar. He served as the Chairman of the Quality Council of India from 2014 to 2022. His board memberships also include Network 18, TV 18 and CIPLA, along with non-profits like Piramal Swasthya. As Chairman of the Capacity Building Commission, he leads the Commission in leading and executing Mission Karma Yogi to help each civil servant have the training and tools needed to deliver performance for the citizens of India. As Chairman of the Quality Council of India, Shri Zainulbhai was involved in several initiatives across the government to improve the quality of goods and services, including Swachh Bharat Abhiyan and other such flagship government projects. He retired as the Chairman of McKinsey India in 2013 after 34 years at the company. We are elated to have Shri Zainulbhai, and we request you to kindly join us on stage today. Lastly, this diverse panel is moderated by our very own Antaraa Vasudev. An experimenter in the civic technology domain, Antaraa Vasudev is the founder of our organization Civis and is an Ashoka Fellow. She has previously worked at the international non-profit Asia Society, where she handled policy-related public education programs. In addition to her work at Asia Society, she volunteered for the global civic technology platform Democracy.Earth. She started her career in understanding how technology can drive civic engagement during India's general elections. She is driven to help build trust between citizens and government through the use of technology. I would like to request Antaraa to take the reins of our much-awaited panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Malika, and thank you to our esteemed guests for joining us today. My name is Antaraa Vasudev, and I'm very, very delighted to be able to moderate this conversation with our luminaries today. For our starting conversation, I would actually like to ask Mr. Zainulbhai. So the Capacity Building Commission actually led a very interesting effort by starting out and actually asking civil servants what they wanted for more effective governments, what they needed. It's a consultative practice that the Capacity Building Commission and Mission Karmayogi even continue till today. So would you perhaps like to shed some light on some of the learnings through that initiative?
Thank you, and a good question to start with. So the commission was set up 3.5 years ago by Honorable Prime Minister.
Sorry.
Then get up and yell.
You could do that as well.
No, thank you for that question. By way of background, Mission Karmayogi and the Capacity Building Commission started about 3.5 years ago. With the broad goal of how do we make sure that every civil servant has the competencies they need to deliver on what we want. And there are lots of things to be done. And as we got started, we thought that maybe we talked to lots of luminaries in the Indian government and outside. And everyone had a view as to what is it that a civil servant should be good at. Okay? And there are, by the way, 3 million civil servants in the center and 22 million at the state level. So it's a very large number, all the way from Safai Karmacharis to Cabinet Secretary. Right? It's a very broad range. And we thought it is impossible for anyone to know what is good for you or what should you know. So we thought that the right way to start out, which was very unusual for the Indian government, is we went and asked each person, Dr. Mohanty, to do your job better, what would you wish you knew that somebody had helped you get better at, and what competencies do you need? And we did that initially for 100,000 people. Very quickly you start noticing some patterns. And so then people would say, no, I don't think this is what they should know. I think you should have this competency. And we'd say that might be true, but 84,000 people don't think so. Right? They think this is what we need. So I think it was, we never thought about it as a uniquely consultative process. I think it was just common sense. How will we figure out what you need? Let's ask you what you should need. And we learned some very interesting things, and I just highlight one or two of them as we go through this. Of course, there was all this stuff about how do you do policy, and we should teach people on policy making and economics, etc. But the number one thing from Class A officers, all of you, since you've been in the government, you know what Class A officers are, which is IAS, IFS, IRS, etc. Class B officers and Class C officers. 90% is Class C, by the way. Only 2% is Class A. Across all these officers, what do you think was in the top 5 competencies or things that they wished we could make them better at? Anyone want to guess?
Stress management.
We have some guesses for stress management.
Right. Actually, it is absolutely true. Across IAS officers, IRS officers, directors, ASOs, SOs, every single level, in the top 3 was stress management. And so we said, great, Excel or Word. Today, you are paying a lot of consultants a lot of money to do Excel analysis and Word documents, etc. If you had taught me as the PPS or as the SO or as an ASO, I could do a lot of this. So today, the course on Microsoft Word and Excel has been taken by 600,000 people.
That's incredible. And I think it just goes to show the scale at which we can actually impart capacity building and upskilling initiatives across the country. I would like to ask my next question to Dr. Mohanty. Dr. Mohanty, I think last year PFRDA undertook a very unique initiative. As Dr. Krishnan was just alluding to, PFRDA codified its regulations on rulemaking. And as a part of this initiative, there are new processes in place, many of which embody some best practices that will pave the way for other regulators, ministries and departments to follow. Dr. Mohanty, I think my question to you was, could you perhaps describe to us what this regulatory process and what the consultation process looks like inside PFRDA?
Antaraa, thank you, and I thank Civis for this opportunity to be part of this very distinguished panel. Anything we do, including regulation, it has to be a consultative process. And we got an opportunity, and the trigger for that was the 23-24 budget announcement, which enjoined on all the financial regulators to look at the regulation comprehensively, and then see how they can improve ease of doing business. And so we reviewed this regulation. So there was a lot of learning from that process. So having done that, it has gone through various stages. Of course, it has to be consultative. Internal committee looked at things, because you are tasked with a particular job. So then obviously you are at the best position to know your own people, technical people, that what is to be done. So and then we had external advisory committee opining on that. Then we put up the draft regulation in the public domain, means draft regulation for public comments and stakeholder consultation. Just putting something you don't expect, everybody comes and opines on that. So we had specific intermediary, specific stakeholder consultation, roundtables and discussions and things like that. And so then following that, the regulation got finalized. We have a pension advisory committee. It went through that. Dr. Krishnan is also a member of that committee. Then it obviously goes to the board to take a decision. And so all these processes were documented, all the comments which were received, and with the comment of the regulator put in the public domain, that something we accepted, not accepted, why, that rationale. And somebody could disagree with that. Having got that learning, and internationally also the various aspects, that how to make a regulation, what are the best practices, putting all that together, then is a how to make a regulation. And essence of that is institutionalizing this process and bringing in a lot more transparency and certainty, that if you're doing regulation ABCD, this is what you'd follow, and it has to be a time-bound process. And essential feature of that, that the need assessment, why you need to do a new regulation or change a regulation, whether it is coming from which stakeholder intermediaries in that process. So it is institutionalizing the process, making it transparent. So it had its biggest test, that whether it is working or not, or you just put it in the public domain. So we are faced with that dilemma. Currently we are working on a new regulation, which is in public domain. It's sitting for 34 days now. That is on the UPS for the government employee, it is government and its own employees. What interest the public has to do that process. And it is the strict time limit, that you have to roll it out by 1st of April. And so given all that consideration, we said no, it has to go through the whole process. So the draft regulation is sitting there. We had pension advisory committee meeting. We had our regulation review advisory committee meeting, gone through that process. Finally the regulation will also come out following that process. So I'll stop at that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mohanty. I do want to highlight 2 points that you mentioned. One is, of course, on deeper institutionalization, and I think my next question for Mr. Malhotra follows that lead. But the other interesting and very important point, which is a best practice that Civis also endorses, is the practice of publishing comments, counter-comments, and reasoning, which can make a conversation. In essence, it actually takes the dialogue a little bit further. Mr. Malhotra, I actually wanted to ask you, there is a 2014 pre-legislative consultation policy. I say this with a big and proud smile on my face because it forms the basis of all of our work at Civis. But more importantly, it also creates certain guidelines for how to conduct a consultation, many of which are followed by a number of different government bodies voluntarily today. If I were to ask you a blue sky question, which is perhaps what are some of the components of an ideal consultation, what would you like to share with us?
Thank you, Antaraa. First of all, I must thank Civis for inviting me in this important discussion, and I'm happy to share that during your first price distribution function also. I was associated and I participated in that. I'm happy that you are doing a good service by awarding those who are following the pre-consultation process in subordinate legislation. You are talking about the regulations only. But the circular of 2014 issued by the Ministry of Law and Justice, of course, a lot of work was done at that time because I was secretary at that time in the ministry. There was a lot of consultation before issue of that circular among all the secretaries of the Government of India, and then that circular was issued, and what all should contain and what process should be followed is also mentioned in that circular. In fact, whatever Dr. Krishnan said or the other principles which have been discussed by my co-panelists here, they all form of that particular circular of 2014. Now, 2014 circular, of course, talked about the principal legislations initially, but the principles which are applicable to the forming or framing of the principal consultation process for the principal legislation equally apply to the subordinate legislation. And when I'm talking of subordinate legislation, I'm not talking only of the regulations which are made by the regulatory bodies created under this, under the particular statute or the principal legislation, but I'm also talking about the rules which are made by the central government, that is the executive body. Because if you are talking of the hierarchy, Dr. Krishna mentioned about the regulations and rules and the regulations, these are the two important aspects. Because life of an individual is generally governed by this, because the principal legislation only lead on the basic principles or the fundamentals on which either the central government makes the rules or the regulatory body which has been created by an act of parliament or state legislature that say how actually this act will work on ground. Therefore, this pre-legislative consultation process which applies to principal legislation also applies to the making of rules as well as to the regulations. And I'm happy that most of the organizations have now started following it, and thanks to organizations like Civics which are promoting it and encouraging people by awarding them that this is the process which should be followed and there should be public involvement also. One of the principles of good governance is there should be a participatory public policy making and there should be transparency. If you are doing pre-legislative consultation process, I think many of the pitfalls which are coming in making a legislation, probably they can be checked. I'll give you the latest example. I think only a few days back you must have heard that a proposal was circulated for amendment in the Advocates Act. Many changes were to be made. Mind it, there was a consultation paper. But as the luck would have it, because it was said bill, probably a wrong impression has gone that this is a consultation on the bill, and once we give our suggestions, probably bill will be introduced in the parliament. And there are a lot of hue and cry among the advocates because certain provisions of the Advocate Act were objectionable from the advocate's point of view, and the government ultimately had to withdraw the consultation paper. I think this I have never heard in the past that it should be done. Consultation paper, there should have been consultation. After that, okay, you can say that we are amending, modify, and we are bringing another consultation paper. Similarly, other two legislation which I would like to mention here is the 3 agricultural laws which were passed by the parliament. Because there was no proper consultation, probably the objective which the government wanted to achieve by those legislation could not be conveyed to the end user of the legislation. And that led to the withdrawal of the legislation even after passing of it. If we are talking of the good result of it, I think some of the examples which I can give is Right to Information Act 2005. There was good consultation. The act is working very well. Arbitration and Conciliation Act, which was passed in 1996 to promote EDR mechanism in our country to reduce burden on the court, which was amended in 2050. There was a lot of consultation, but again there is a caveat to it. That consultation, it was too long because that started somewhere in 2002, 2003, and ultimately the bill could see light of the day in 2015. I'm not looking for that kind of consultation. It should be time bound, and after time bound considering it, ultimately the parliamentarian or the executive before introducing the bill in the legislation must consider all the pros and cons and then bring the bill before the House. If that process is followed, then probably the transparency will be there, more confidence of the public will be generated, and probably implementation of the law will be much easier. And as I said, Regulations and rules are more important even than the principal legislation, although both of them derive their authority from the principal legislation. But because for the common man, the details are laid down in these two, therefore, for them, public consultation is more important. Dr. Krishnan also mentioned about the recent regulation issued by SEBI, that how when you are making a regulation, how consultation should be done, that itself is being regulated by the legislation. I think the time has come. Once the people have matured enough to understand that with their participation, probably the legislature will be making a better laws and their implementation will become more effective. I think a time has come when the pre-legislative consultation process itself should get a statutory backing, as is being done by these regulatory bodies by making the regulation, okay, we will be governed by this. Because once there is a regulation, you can always question them if they are not followed the regulation, why this procedure was not followed. So I think we are moving in the right direction, and probably this consultation is making the laws much better, and we have seen that wherever before passing the law or making the regulation, consultation was not done, probably there have been pitfalls, and those kind of pitfalls can be stopped if this procedure is properly followed.
Thank you so much, Mr. Malhotra. I think one interesting thread again there is the fact that you mentioned the importance of outreach in governance, and I think the next two questions that I have for Dr. Mohanty as well as Shri Adil Zainulbhai are on that theme. Dr. Mohanty, I think PFRDA has a very ambitious goal of almost 13.6 lakh crore subscribers, if I'm not wrong, in this year, and a large part of that is comes from building awareness amongst individuals on the importance of pension and the importance of the different schemes that are put together. From that perspective, how do you view the importance of outreach in governance?
No, outreach is very important, and particularly in case of pension. But if you see a PFRDA is a strange regulator. Not only makes regulation, it also markets. You say why this product is good. You go and convince people that everybody should take pension. It's a well-regulated product, and it is a necessity that you have to do. And given our demography and economic prospect that we see, we are one of the countries where pension penetration is very less. And partly it could be lack of financial ability for people to opt for that, or partly also could be in the nature of our labor market. Pension is considered to be into the formal sector, and largely I think it is a lack of awareness that people don't have money. That's not the case. Those who have the ability, they don't put. So then we have to do a lot of outreach, and obviously as a regulator we have launched a campaign. NPS Jaruri Hai, and you would be seeing on TV and other things that we are doing this, of course, the media campaign. And we have also roped in other stakeholders, because you have training agencies, they also impact training. So we do those kind of things. So apart from that, we are also expanding the intermediary base. Basically you walk to your bank and ask for a NPS to be taken. So we have also, now recently, allowed regional rural banks that they can also give NPS. I think India is a country that gone to the other extreme, and the NPS was for government servants. But now it is socialized. Now a newborn baby can also opt for NPS, and I'm happy to say that it was just launched by Honorable Finance Minister in September. And we have more than 1 lakh babies opting for NPS, which is NPS Vaschalya. So that is the overall put together, we are about 11 lakh non-government NPS subscribers for this year target we have put, and we are almost at that. Of course, the government employees necessarily would have to come into the NPS. So apart from that, this year we have also for the low income, underprivileged people, there's something called active APY subscriber. So we are doing reasonably well, but there's a long way to go.
Right, so and I think congratulations on on the milestones that are being hit in these new schemes. I know that the schemes are becoming more familiar to us as citizens as well, and that is really kudos to PFRDA and the work being done there. Mr. Zainulbhai, I have an interesting question. We recently concluded the National Learning Week or Karma Yogi Saptah, which is in some ways an avenue to mobilize at a very large scale learners and certain behavior change efforts within government as well. Would you like to share a little bit with us about how outreach played a role there?
I wanted to add one other point to that just before we get started on it, because it links up with what you said about outreach and consultation, that you put in for laws and for regulations. But actually that principle applies to a slightly broader set of areas. And let me give you as an example, which we were involved in, and I think it sheds light on how do you get the citizen involved. So as you know, last year there was a large effort by various ministries and Niti Aayog and others to create the document for Viksit Bharat, to create the underlying strategies for reaching Viksit Bharat. And a lot of secretaries and a lot of Government of India personnel were involved in it in a very deep way. So it was very, very consultative in that sense. But at the point that it was getting ready, the PM said, why should this be something that the government does? And actually opened it up for consultation to 100 universities. And I think at the end of it, there were 250,000 inputs from students and from citizens onto the Viksit Bharat plan. And all of them, you could document it and go through it and see what were some of the things that came out. And what it did, in addition to some very good ideas coming out, which is always great, it also got a lot of people bought into it. As to, what is this thing, then we had a chance to, to participate in it, and especially students who will be the beneficiaries of it. For us, I don't know, 2047 seems quite far away. But for them, this will be the prime of their working life. And so they had a huge interest in being involved in it. It had nothing to do with any rules, regulations, or laws that are going to be passed. But it had to do with a very important element of where the nation is going. So I think the principle of consultation actually is applicable in a much broader way. And for this PM, I think that is his natural inclination. If you say, I've talked to 10 people, he will say, but why haven't you talked to 10,000? Why have you talked to 10? What does that mean? Right? And he is always asking whoever he runs into about things to get his own input into. So I think we applied to it should be applicable, the principle, to a much broader set. And the advantage today is that technology allows you to get inputs from people much faster and in a very broad way. And I think eGov has a basis for doing that, etc. So that very quickly you can get inputs. Also, you don't have to, it's not a very long process to get it. So I think if we don't get inputs on various areas we're thinking about, including regulations and laws, we will lose something because it will just not give us that. So anyway, I just wanted to highlight that. Getting to National Learning Week, it is also a technology play in a sense. The idea of training civil servants has been around since the very beginning of the IAS. And Labasna was set up, and NASIN has a great training institution, and BDT has a great training institution. So the principle of training and capacity building has been around for a long time. I think what is different is you can use technology to give people competencies they need when they need it. The principle of adult learning is that I will learn if I need something tomorrow. If you teach me something today and say it might be useful 5 years from now, I'll retain 1% of it. But if I need it tomorrow, then I can get it instantly. And we can see this in 2 or 3 areas which were highlighted during National Learning Week. One of the courses that was the most popular during National Learning Week, and I think something like 5 lakh people took it, was Viksit Bharat. Right? It was just coming out then, there was a lot of interest by people in it, and so we put the course up there, and all of a sudden, so our ability to communicate with the citizen and tell them what is going on, you can now do that in a few days or in a week. So since, I think somebody here is from tax, you're from tax, right? So somebody else is here from the tax area. So in taxes, things are changing all the time. Our normal approach is, we will issue circulars, right? Because circulars is sort of like a regulation. But circulars are fairly dry and they don't explain. So the thought is that every time a new law comes out, or every time a set of regulations come out, if I can create a 10-minute course on it, then I can instantly get to hundreds of thousands of people. So when the 3 new security laws came out last year, I think you mentioned that a little earlier. No, you were mentioning the farm law. Sorry, the 3 security laws, when they came out last year, 3 20-minute programs in multiple languages were put on iGot. And something like, 7 lakh people took it. So they understand the basics. Actually, I think that's relatively low. We should have every policeman take those courses, so we'll get there. So what National Learning Week did is, when it made people familiar that there is something like this around, where if I have a question about something that's new, I can find potentially the answers to that when I want it, and when something is relevant to me. So if we can get that thinking into people, then they don't have to know everything all the time, but they can get it when they need it right away. I'll end with one more anecdote, which is, we all talk about AI and artificial intelligence is the hot new thing of the day, and everyone thinks it should be something that all the scientists should pay a lot of attention to, and government should come up with big schemes for this, etc. Our view was quite different. Our view is that it is something that is useful for every single person. It doesn't matter whether it is MTS to the cabinet secretary. So in the last 8 months, 1.3 million people have taken a course on AI on iGot. There is no other civil service in the world that has been able to train its civil servants that quickly on a technology. I don't think that's enough, by the way, because that's a very short course, but I'm just giving you as an example of how technology can allow us to take any of these and spread them very far. I think by the end of this calendar year, forget about this fiscal year, all 22 million Indian civil servants should have taken a course in AI in their own language, right? So I think that is the power of consultation, of getting it out there to people. And AI is something where everybody has a new way of using it. It isn't that I have to think about 3 big ideas. It is everybody has. So if we can teach them that, they will be able to help us improve governance also. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zainulbhai. I think the power of technology, we're only just uncovering it in many ways, and I personally really look to the Karma Yogi Bharat platform to learn how certain missions can be scaled at such depth and at such quality as well. So that is something that I do want to point out for everybody here as well. My next question actually is perhaps somewhat related to technology, but more related to global best practice. And Dr. Mohanty, I wanted to ask you, having spent some time at the IMF, as well as different international bodies, Civis's methodology actually not only focuses on the pre-legislative consultation policy of 2014, but also OECD guidelines as well as UN public consultation guidelines. Are there any global best practices in the domain of consultation that you believe would be valuable to India today?
No, many of those we also reflect while drafting our own policy, these principles. And obviously one is the, the trade-offs involved, risk and the trade-offs of what you are really trying to do. So that would be one aspect. Other would be the need analysis. Do you really need it? And in a transparent way, you have to put out the economic cost benefit analysis of that whole process that we would have to. It can play a great role in that, cataloging, categorizing the things, bringing out the essence of that, processing, and saving time in the whole process. So these are the few things that one could really do. Other aspect is that coordination, because then you would have to see, sometime that we work at cross purposes, and it would be ideal, it should be a coordinated response for that. For example, particular securities in the market, many entities are acting on that process.
As compared to policy making, because there you can be a little more open. So basic principle in both the cases remain the same. And probably when you are making legislation, because there are a number of different authorities involved in that, maybe probably time has come when the guidelines or the principles should be so streamlined, rather it should be made more binding from the legislation point of view, because legislation, first they must have confidence of the people for whom they are being made, and secondly they are subject to scrutiny by the legislature itself through the subordinate committees, as Dr. Krishnan has mentioned. Now coming to the best practices, I personally feel that we in our country have a very well laid down procedure for legislation making. Only thing is, so far as the consultation process is concerned, probably that was not structured, which has been during the last about a decade or so, has been more structured now. And unfortunately what has happened, I mean it's my own personal experience, and only a few days back I was reading a paper where I read that the parliamentary practice of referring the bills to the select committee or the standing committee from 2014 to 2019, the figures were given, and it was said that 90% of the bills were not referred to the select committee or the standing committee, or the procedure as laid down in the parliamentary procedure was not followed. If that has happened, I think we need to reconsider this particular aspect and see that the kind of confidence which has been developed in the functioning of these committees, that is restored. And if we don't want to do it, we want to change the procedure, let there be a transparency and let us know that what process will be followed in the parliament. Second point which I want to make here is the laws now which are being made by the parliament, they are on more and more technical subjects. Maybe IPRs, maybe cyber laws and others. And obviously we don't expect the parliamentarian to have that kind of expertise. So I think the time has come when instead of passing detailed legislation or lengthy legislation running into 500 pages or 700 pages or 1000 pages, it should be only an enabling legislation which is regulated by the rules made by the central government. And further, the expert bodies, the regulators, are given enough power to change those regulations so that the objective of the law can be achieved by framing the regulations, because amending the regulation is much more easier as compared to amending the law. So I think this, if we are able to follow this practice, making our legislation shorter, and I think world over this kind of practices are now being followed. And probably time has come when we should also do that. Of course, certain changes are being brought now. Recently, the new income tax bill has been introduced in the parliament, whereby they have, of course, the number of sections might have been increased, but I think a lot of the bulk has been taken away, and the sections which were not required have been done away with. Remaining principles, basic principles remain the same. But because from 1960 onward it has been amended more than 600 times, the time has come when you should have a new legislation. And it should be in a simple language. The technical language which I have been using in the past probably need to be changed to be used by simple language. But as a student of law, I can say it is very easy to say that you are passing a law, you use simple language, but when you are actually drafting it, it becomes very difficult to use simple language, because that is likely to be misunderstood and misinterpreted. Because when the matter goes to the court, the kind of arguments which take place and the kind of arguments which are given by the both sides, I think that makes the job of the legislature also much difficult to see that he is reflecting his intention the way they want to convey to the person for achieving the objective of the legislation. So use of simple language is desirable, but simplicity doesn't mean that you take away the clarity. Clarity should remain there, and the principal legislation should be only an enabling legislation. The rest of it should be dealt with by rules and regulations.
Thank you so much. I particularly would like to zero in on the point of procedure and amending procedure and enhancing and strengthening procedure. My next question, and this would be our closing question for today's panel discussion, is just that. Last year, we marked 10 years of India's pre-legislative consultation policy being enforced. We are now looking at the next decade and what is yet to come. For me personally, I know codification and procedural enhancement is my perhaps top item on my wish list. But if our speakers would also like to share any of their thoughts in terms of what the next decade could bring and what you're excited about for consultation to come. Mr. Malhotra, would you like to start?
Yes, as I said earlier, the time has come that pre-legislative consultation process should be mandatory in respect of all, and some of the organizations, we gave an example, Dr. Krishnan also mentioned, I also mentioned about the SEBI itself making that kind of regulations. So instead of SEBI making a regulation or regulatory body making a regulation, if the principal legislation itself can specify, like even for the scrutiny of legislation, which is done by the Committee on Subordinate Legislation, law provision is made in the law itself. Similarly, this pre-legislative consultation process itself can be incorporated in the principal legislation so that it becomes mandatory and there is more transparency in the making of these laws. With that, I think it will be a very positive development if we can achieve this in the coming decade.
Thank you so much, sir. Dr. Mohanty?
I think pre-consultation becomes absolutely important. And the way the technology, institutional framework and the things are moving so rapidly, there is also a need for a periodic review more frequently. One thing is that one hopes the best thing is that you put a sunset clause that, sometime we have that inertia, don't look at it, sunset is there, then we'll wake up and look at it. But I think periodic review and weeding out things becomes very important so that the legislation remains forward-looking and relevant. That is very important.
Absolutely, sir. Mrs. Zainulbhai.
I'll just stress the theme of I think the kinds of consultation and how deep you can do it is becoming much easier with technology. And so I think over the next 10 years, you'd like to see this become an easier process. It's built in and it brings in more people into it, would be my suggestion for the next 10 years.
Thank you so much, Mrs.
I think one point
Of course, please.
that organization like civics, they can play a better and more important role in helping the government, because for everything you can't depend on the government. I think the civil society and the common man also have to extend their help to the government. And organization like yours can play a very important role in assisting the government as well as the regulatory body to see that the laws which are made are more user-friendly.
Thank you so much. With that, we'd like to close our panel discussion. May I please request everybody to join me in conveying a loud round of applause for our panelists who have so patiently taken us through many things today.